3 things are changing about your money right now, and every single one of them was written to help you. Here's what nobody says out loud about them. All 3 have the same flaw sitting inside the design. In every case, the protection is hardest to reach for exactly the person who needs it most. One of them can stop your payment from arriving at all, and the people still exposed to it are among the oldest people in this country. One of them hands back thousands of dollars at tax time, and by its own arithmetic, it cannot reach the seniors with the least money. Not because anybody excluded them, because of how the math works. And one of them puts a hard ceiling on what you pay for your medicine for the rest of the year, except you have to be able to afford to reach the ceiling before it protects you. 3 changes: your deposit, your refund, your medicine. And there is one form in this video. It takes about 10 minutes. The Social Security Administration estimates it is worth an average of $5,700 a year to the people who file it. And the people who need it most are the ones who talk themselves out of filing it before they ever start, using a reason I am going to take apart for you near the end. None of these are things that might matter someday. All 3 are live right now. They all have real dollars attached, and 2 of them have clocks running. So before we go through them, let me answer the question you are probably already asking, which is why you have not heard about any of this from anybody official. Nobody calls your house. That is the whole answer. A change like this shows up as one line inside a very long bill, or a notice posted on a government website in language nobody would read voluntarily, or a rule that takes effect in a quiet month while the news is busy with something louder. There is no letter that says, "You personally qualify for this, here is what to do." The system assumes you will find out. And when you do not find out, nothing happens. No alarm goes off. The money simply stays where it is, or the deadline slides past, and the only person who ever knew there was something to do was somebody who happened to be paying attention on the right day. That is not a conspiracy. It is just how a system with 70 million people in it behaves when nobody is assigned to tell you anything. My name is Kevin. I go read the boring documents and the fine print so that you do not have to sit with them. Every week I bring one of these here in plain English with a specific move attached, because the headline never put $1 in anybody's account. The form does. The phone call does. If that is useful to you, subscribe and turn the bell on, because the 3rd change in this video is the one with the 10-minute form on it, and it is the one most people watching will wrongly assume does not apply to them. Change 1. The paper check is finished, and the payment has to have somewhere to go. Here is the situation in plain terms. Federal law and an executive order signed in March of last year, Executive Order 14,247, require federal benefits to be paid electronically. The Social Security Administration stopped issuing new paper checks as of the 30th of September last year, and in a blog post published this June, the agency stated plainly that it plans to complete the full transition to electronic payments for all beneficiaries before the end of this year. Read that carefully. All beneficiaries, before the end of this year. If your Social Security already lands in a bank account, you are finished. Nothing here applies to you, nothing changes, the money arrives the way it always has. Take the breath. This is for the small group still on paper, and for the much larger group of you who have a parent, a neighbor, a sister-in-law, or somebody at your church who is. How small a group? Fewer than 1% of beneficiaries. Somewhere between roughly 280,000 and 400,000 people, depending on which month you count. In September of last year, it was close to 400,000, down from about 456,000 the previous March. Now hold both halves of that in your head at once, because this is where the flaw shows up. Less than 1% sounds like a rounding error. It is also several 100,000 human beings who are, almost by definition, the hardest people in the country to reach with a notice. Think about who is still on paper after 40 years of direct deposit being available. It is not somebody who evaluated the options and chose paper for the convenience. It is very often the oldest people on the rolls, people who do not bank online or do not bank at all, people in places with no branch within driving distance, people who have done it the exact same way since the 1970s and have never once had a reason to change. And every argument for making this change is a good argument. Treasury puts the cost of printing and mailing a single check at $3.07, roughly 20 times what an electronic payment costs. And Social Security states directly that a paper check is 16 times more likely to be lost, stolen, altered, or returned undeliverable than an electronic payment. 16 times. Mail theft of benefit checks is a real crime committed against real seniors, and the mailbox at the end of a driveway is the weakest point in the whole chain. So the change protects people, genuinely. And the people it protects are the hardest ones to inform that it is happening. That is not my framing. Nancy Altman, who runs Social Security Works and has spent a career defending this program, called the policy devastating for disadvantaged Americans. And her reasoning was specific. She pointed out that some of these people lack the money to open a bank account at all, to maintain a minimum balance, or to absorb bank fees, and that some of them navigate the world by receiving a paper check and cashing it immediately for food and rent, and have no other method. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The paper check is the most dangerous way to receive money, and it is the only way some people have ever received it. There is no version of this change that is clean for everybody, and anybody presenting it as simple is not being straight with you. Ozella is 86, and she has lived in the same house in the same county since 1963. There is no bank branch in her town anymore. There was one. It closed. The nearest one now is a 26-minute drive, and she stopped driving 4 years ago after a bad afternoon on a 2-lane road that frightened her badly enough that she handed her daughter the keys herself. She has never had an online account for anything. Not one. She does not think of that as a failing, and neither do I, because for 86 years the world worked fine without one. When the notices started arriving about the paper check ending, she read them. She understood them perfectly well. What she did not have was a way to act on them. Every instruction assumed a bank branch she could get to, or an internet account she did not have. So she did what a reasonable person does when the instructions do not fit her life. She set them on the counter and waited to see whether the check would keep coming. That gap between understanding what is happening and having a way to act on it is the entire reason I put the quiet rules together. Because the moment this actually turns into a crisis is not the month the notice arrives. It is the first morning the mailbox is empty and the rent is due, and there is nobody to call who can put the money in her hand today. Sitting down beforehand while the check is still arriving and nothing has gone wrong is a single, quiet afternoon at a kitchen table. Doing it afterward is a phone call from a woman who has no money and no way to get any. It is at kevinexplains.shop. The link is in the description below and in the pinned comment at the top of the comments. And if you are watching this on your television right now, there is a code on the screen you can point your phone camera at. 7-day guarantee, no argument, no questions. If it does not hand you something you did not already have, send it back. Now here is exactly what to do. And there are 2 paths, and one of them is the one almost nobody knows exists. The first path is ordinary direct deposit. You need 3 things in front of you. Your bank account number, your bank's routing number, both printed along the bottom of any check you have and available from the bank in 30 seconds if you do not, and your own Social Security information. You can set it up 3 ways: through a free My Social Security account on the agency's website, by calling Social Security directly and having them do it over the phone, and their technicians are available Monday through Friday from 7:30 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon Eastern Time, or by walking into your own bank and asking them to send your direct deposit information to Social Security electronically, which they will do, and which they do every single day. That third option is the one to use if the website feels like a wall. Your bank does this constantly. Ask them. The second path is the one that matters for people without a bank account, and I want to be emphatic about it because there is a widespread belief that no bank account means no way to receive the money. That belief is wrong. It is called the Direct Express card. It is a prepaid debit card the federal government loads your benefit onto every single month. It exists specifically for people who do not have and do not want a traditional bank account. There is no minimum balance to maintain. There is no monthly maintenance fee eating at it. You use it at the grocery store, at the pharmacy, at the ATM, anywhere a debit card works. So if you have never had a bank account in your life, and you do not want one, and you have been quietly dreading this whole thing on the assumption that it means opening one, it does not. There is a path built for exactly your situation, and it has been sitting there the entire time. There are 2 practical questions people always have about that card, so let me answer them before you have to ask. The first is whether the money is protected the way money in a bank is protected. It is a prepaid card issued through a federally insured institution, and the balance on it carries deposit insurance the same way an account balance does. You are not holding cash in a plastic rectangle. The second is whether it costs you anything. The card is designed so that the ordinary uses are free. You can get your money without a fee if you use the right machines and the right methods, and the ways to incur a charge are avoidable ones, generally involving out-of-network machines or extra services you would not normally need. So when somebody sets one of these up for a parent, the thing to spend 5 minutes on is which ATM network is free in their town. That 5 minutes is the difference between a card that costs nothing and a card that quietly leaks a few dollars every month. And there is a third question nobody asks that they should. If somebody in your family is on the card already, or about to be, make sure the address on file with Social Security is current, because a replacement card goes to the address on file and nowhere else. One more thing, and I include it because I never want to oversell a rule to you. There is a waiver. The Treasury Department does allow a request for an exception to the electronic requirement in genuine hardship situations. For example, where there is no banking access at all. There is a phone line for it, and I have put the number in the description below. But be honest with yourself about it. That waiver is written for rare hardship. It is not a way to keep a paper check because you prefer paper, and treating it as one is a good way to end up with no payment while you wait on a decision. For nearly everybody watching, the right move is direct deposit or the direct express card, done now, while everything is calm, rather than after a payment has already failed to arrive. Change 2. There is a deduction worth $6,000 a person that most people who qualify will never claim. This came out of the large federal tax law passed last year. Inside it is an additional deduction for people 65 and older, worth up to $6,000 per qualifying person, and it runs for tax years 2025 through 2028 per person. So if you are married and both of you are 65 or older, that is 2 of them. $12,000 of income shielded from federal tax, stacked on top of the standard deduction you already take, and on top of the existing additional deduction for being over 65 that has been in the code for years. For a lot of retired couples, that is well over $1,000 staying in the account instead of going out. For plenty of households, it is the difference between writing a check to the IRS in April and writing nothing. And here's what makes it unusually easy to use. You do not have to itemize. No shoebox of receipts, no mortgage interest, no charitable giving records, none of the machinery people assume you need in order to get a real tax break. You take your ordinary standard deduction the same simple way you always have, and this sits on top of it. Now the part you have to get exactly right, because it is strict. There is an income line. The full amount goes to people with modified adjusted gross income up to $75,000 filing single or $150,000 married filing jointly. Above those lines, it does not vanish, it shrinks. It phases out gradually, and it is gone entirely at $175,000 single or $250,000 for a couple. For most people watching, you are comfortably under that and you get the whole thing. But you need to know where the line is, and here is why that matters more than it sounds. The income that counts is not just your Social Security. It is your retirement account withdrawals, your interest and dividends, the gain if you sold a piece of property. All of it added together into one number. So consider what happens if you take a large distribution out of an individual retirement account in a single year. Maybe you are replacing a roof. Maybe you are helping a grandchild. Maybe a required withdrawal came due and you took extra while you were in there. That one decision, made in November without thinking about it, can push your income over the line and shrink or erase the deduction you were counting on. The fix is timing, and it is free. If you are anywhere near that line and you need to pull a large amount out, look at whether splitting it across 2 calendar years works for your situation. Half in December and half in January is the same money in your hands within weeks of each other, and it can be the difference between keeping the full deduction and losing a meaningful piece of it. A little arithmetic in November beats a surprise in April every single time. One more eligibility detail that catches people. If you are married and you file separately, you are shut out of this entirely, regardless of age or income. For most couples, filing jointly is what unlocks it. And there is one more piece of this that gets confused constantly. So let me separate 2 things that sound identical. There has been an additional standard deduction for people 65 and older in the tax code for many years. That is not the new thing. That one is smaller, it has been there a long while, and if you have been filing after 65, you have almost certainly been getting it without ever thinking about it. The new deduction is separate, and it stacks on top. So a person over 65 is now potentially looking at 3 layers. The ordinary standard deduction, the long-standing additional amount for being over 65, and then this new one on top of both. People hear the phrase senior deduction and assume it is the one they already had, conclude they are covered, and move on. That assumption is the single most common way this gets missed, and it is exactly what happened to the man I am about to tell you about. The other thing worth knowing is that this one is not restricted to people taking the standard deduction. If you do itemize, for whatever reason, you are not excluded from it. That is unusual, and it is worth saying, because most breaks make you pick one lane or the other. Now the flaw. Because this one has the same shape as the first, a deduction reduces the income you are taxed on, which means a deduction can only help you if you owe tax in the first place. So picture a widow living on Social Security alone, with a modest benefit and no pension and no withdrawals, whose total income already falls below the threshold where any federal income tax is owed. She is 65. She qualifies. And the deduction is worth nothing to her, because you cannot reduce a tax bill that is already zero. Nobody wrote her out of it. There is no exclusion with her name on it. It is simply what a deduction is, and what it structurally cannot do. So a benefit created specifically for older Americans delivers the most to older Americans, in the middle and upper middle, less as you go down, and precisely nothing at the bottom. That is the second time in this video the same pattern has appeared, and we are not done. If that describes your household, do not close the video, because the third change is the one built for exactly your situation, and it is worth far more than this one. Rayburn is 71, a retired diesel mechanic, and he filed his own taxes on paper at the same kitchen table for 38 years and was quietly proud of it. He filed last spring the way he always had. Standard deduction, the extra amount for being over 65, done in an afternoon, mailed it, forgot about it. He had never heard of the new deduction. Nobody mentioned it because there was nobody whose job it was to mention it. His software did not flag it because he was not using software. His preparer did not raise it because he did not have one. He found out in a barbershop in June. Somebody was complaining about their taxes and said the number 6,000 out loud, and Rayburn went home and looked it up and discovered he had qualified for the whole thing and had simply not claimed it. And I want you to notice what he said next, because it is the thing I hear most often. He did not say he felt cheated. He said he felt stupid. He was not stupid. He was uninformed by a system that had no mechanism for informing him, and those are entirely different things. And I want to stay with that feeling for a second because I get more letters about it than almost anything else I cover. There is a particular kind of embarrassment that comes with finding out late about money you were owed. It does not feel like being unlucky. It feels like a verdict on you. People tell me they should have known. They should have looked into it. Everybody else must have known. Everybody else did not know. That is the part I want to hand you. On something like this deduction, the people who claimed it in the first year overwhelmingly did so because they happened to use software that asked, or happened to have a preparer who was current, or happened to hear a number out loud in a barbershop. Almost nobody arrived at it by being more diligent than Rayburn was. Diligence had very little to do with it. Exposure did. Whether the information happened to cross your path. So if you are sitting there running through the last few years wondering what else you have missed, that is a reasonable thing to wonder, and it is not a character flaw. It is the predictable result of a system where nothing gets sent to you and everything has to be found. That difference is what the guide is actually for, not clever strategy. The plain list of what exists and what to say in large print so that nobody finds out in a barbershop in June about money they were entitled to in April. Same place, kevinexplains.shop. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment, and there is a code on your screen if you are watching on the television. 7-day guarantee every time, always. A man at his own kitchen table doing everything right for 38 years and never once being told what was on the table. Now, the good news for Rayburn, and it applies to a great many of you, he was not out of luck. And this is the part of this whole video that I would guess fewer than 1 person in 100 knows about. If you already filed a return for a year in which you qualified for this deduction and you did not claim it, you can go back and get it. You file an amended return. The form is called 1040X. It exists precisely for this, for the situation where the original return was correct as far as you knew at the time, and you have since learned something you did not know. You are not asking for a favor. You are not throwing yourself on anybody's mercy. You are correcting a return, which is a completely ordinary thing that happens constantly. And if the correction means you overpaid, the difference comes back to you. Now do the arithmetic on what that can be worth. This deduction covers tax years 2025 through 2028. A married couple, both over 65, both qualifying, who never hear about it, are leaving $12,000 of shielded income unclaimed every year for 4 consecutive years. That is not a rounding error, and it is not a coupon. Depending on the bracket, that is thousands of real dollars over the run of it. So here is the specific move, and use these words. If somebody prepares your taxes, tell them directly, I am over 65. I want to make sure you are taking the new senior deduction from the tax law passed last year, and I want you to check whether I missed it on the return I already filed. If you file yourself with software, it will ask your age and route you to it, but only if you do not click past the question at speed. And if you file on paper the way Rayburn does, look at the line, know it exists before you start, and if you missed a year, 1040X is how you go back for it. Change 3. There is now a hard ceiling on what you pay for your prescriptions, and there is a program that pushes it down to almost nothing. For most of the history of Medicare drug coverage, the cruelest feature was that there was no real upper limit. If you had a serious illness and an expensive medication, a cancer drug, a specialty injection, something running thousands of dollars a year, you paid, and there was no finish line anywhere on the calendar, year after year. That is the thing that has changed. Federal law put an annual cap on what you pay out of pocket for covered prescription drugs under Part D. It began at $2,000, it adjusts for inflation, and for this year it sits at $2,100. Here is what that actually means at the pharmacy counter. Once your own out-of-pocket spending on covered Part D drugs reaches $2,100 in a calendar year, you are done. Your plan pays 100% of the cost of your covered medications for the rest of that year. Not a smaller share. All of it. For somebody on a medication running $500 a month, that is the difference between $6,000 a year and $2,100 and then nothing. And the timing is the part that surprises people, in a good way. If you are on an expensive drug, you spend heavily in January and February and March, and you can hit that ceiling somewhere in the spring. From that moment through the end of December, every covered prescription costs you nothing at the counter. For a household that has been splitting tablets, stretching a bottle, or skipping doses to make the month work, that is not a financial statistic. That is being able to take the medicine the doctor actually prescribed. Now let me be precise about what counts, because people get this wrong and it costs them. What counts toward the ceiling is what you actually hand over for covered drugs. Your deductible, your co-pays, your co-insurance. Every dollar of that climbs toward the cap. What does not count is your monthly premium, the amount you pay simply to have the plan. That is separate, and it continues all year regardless. And here is the third appearance of the same flaw, and it is the sharpest one. The ceiling only protects you after you have paid $2,100, which means the person the cap was designed to rescue, the seriously ill senior on an expensive medication, has to be able to front $2,100 in the first months of the year in order to reach the protection. Somebody who cannot afford a $600 copay in February does not get to the ceiling that would have saved them thousands. They do not fill the prescription. They fill it every other month, or they cut the dose, or they choose between it and something else. And a cap they never reach protects them exactly as much as no cap at all. So the ceiling is real, and it is a genuine improvement, and it is easiest to use if you have some money to begin with. Which brings me to the fix for that. And this is the 10-minute form I mentioned at the very start. It is a federal program called Extra Help. You may also see it called the Part D Low Income Subsidy. It is run through Social Security in partnership with Medicare, and it exists for one purpose, which is people whose income and savings are limited. What it does is not small. It covers your Part D premium. It drops your deductible to $0. And it caps what you pay for an individual prescription at roughly $5.10 for a generic and $12.65 for a brand-name drug this year. Say those numbers back to yourself if you are somebody who has been rationing medication. $5.10, $12.65. The Social Security Administration estimates the average annual value of Extra Help at about $5,700 per person. And there is something worth knowing that changed a couple of years ago. There used to be a partial version of this, a reduced tier for people just above the line. That was eliminated. Everybody who now qualifies receives the full benefit. There is no longer a lesser version to land in. Here are the limits for this year, and I want you to actually hear the numbers rather than assume. On income, the threshold is 150% of the federal poverty guideline, which works out to roughly $23,500 a year for one person, or about $31,700 for a married couple living together. The figures run a little higher in Alaska and Hawaii. On resources, meaning countable savings, the limit is about $16,590 for an individual and about $33,100 for a couple. And there is an exclusion many people miss. If you tell Social Security you have money set aside for burial expenses, you can exclude up to $1,500 per person on top, which raises the limits to roughly $18,090 and $36,100. Now here is the part people get wrong, and it costs them the whole benefit. Your house does not count. Your vehicle does not count. Your personal belongings do not count. What counts is checking and savings, certificates of deposit, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and retirement accounts. So the person who says, "I own my home, I could never qualify," is looking at the wrong asset. The home is excluded. The question is, what is in the accounts? And that is the reason I promised you at the start of this video, the one people use to talk themselves out of the form before they start. Some version of, "I am sure I make too much, so why bother?" Stop right there. The limits are more generous than nearly everybody assumes, and they have moved. Somebody who was turned down years ago can qualify today. Somebody whose neighbor told them not to waste their time is sitting on an average of $5,700 a year. And it costs you nothing whatsoever to find out, because the application is free and Social Security runs the numbers for you. Some people never need to apply at all. If you have full Medicaid or supplemental security income, or you are in a Medicare savings program, you are automatically enrolled and you should have received a purple letter from Social Security saying so. If you think you are in that category and you have never seen that letter, that is worth one phone call to confirm. Everybody else applies. The form is called the SSA 1020. You can do it online at the Social Security website in about 10 minutes, or by phone on the main Social Security line, and the number is in the description below, or in person at a field office. Decisions typically come back within 2 to 4 weeks. Two more things that will save you real trouble. First, roughly 1 in 5 applications gets denied, and most denials are documentation problems rather than genuine ineligibility. Missing paperwork, a retirement account entered wrong, a form left incomplete. Most of those are fixable inside 60 days. So a denial is not a verdict. It is usually a request for one more piece of paper, and the mistake is treating it as the end. Second, and this is the one that stacks, apply for a Medicare savings program through your state Medicaid agency at the same time. Qualifying for one of those enrolls you in extra help automatically, and, depending on which one, can also pay your Part B premium. That is one more application on the same afternoon for a substantially larger total benefit. And if your own situation is complicated, if you are looking at these limits and cannot work out whether you are over or under, email me. The address is on your screen and in the description below. I read every single one that comes in. And one practical note on timing, because it decides whether you get several months of benefit or none. Coverage under Extra Help generally begins the first day of the month after you are approved. It does not reach backward to reimburse you for the year you already paid. So every month you delay the application is a month at full price that you do not get back, which is why the honest answer to "when should I apply" is always this week rather than at the next open enrollment. And once you are approved, it is not permanent and unreviewable in either direction. Social Security reviews eligibility periodically, so a change in your circumstances can affect it later. But the reverse is the point most people miss. Being over the line 1 year does not disqualify you forever. If your income falls, if a spouse dies and the household drops to 1 check, if savings get spent down on medical costs, you can apply again. Nothing about a previous denial closes the door. Bernita is 69, and she has taken the same medication every day for 11 years. She had heard about Extra Help. She could have told you the name of it. And she never applied, for a reason she gave me in 1 sentence. She said, "I own my house, so I did not think I would be anywhere close." Her house is not a countable resource. It never was. It sat entirely outside the calculation the whole time, and she had disqualified herself from a program worth thousands a year based on the single asset the program does not look at. She was not careless with her money. She was careful with it her entire life. She was careful with the wrong number. Here's what I actually think about all three of these, and you are welcome to disagree with any of it. On the paper check ending, I think both sides of that argument are right, and I am not going to pretend one of them is silly. 16 times more likely to be stolen is a real number, and mail theft against seniors is a real crime, so the case for moving everybody electronic is strong. And the objection is also correct, that the last several 100,000 people on paper are the least reachable people in the country, and some of them cannot easily open an account at all. Where I come down is narrow. Whatever you think of the policy, the Direct Express card answers the main objection for most of the people affected, and hardly any of them have been told it exists. On the deduction, I do not have a political position for you. Some will say it is a meaningful break for retirees in the middle. Others will say a deduction is the wrong instrument if the goal is helping older Americans, since it reaches least where the need is greatest. Both of those are honest readings of the same law. What I keep coming back to is the pattern underneath all three, and it is not about any party. Every one of these was designed by people who were genuinely trying to help. And in all three, the design works best for the person who already has the most. The one with a bank account, the one who owes tax, the one who can front $2,100 in March. Nobody built that on purpose. It is what happens when a benefit is delivered through a mechanism that requires something of you before it can reach you, and nobody checks afterward to see who was left standing outside the mechanism. Which is why the only genuine defense any of us has is knowing. Not voting differently, not arguing better, just knowing, before the deadline rather than after it. So here it is. 3 changes, 3 moves. That is the whole thing. If you or anybody you love still receives a paper check, get on to direct deposit or the Direct Express card this week. Bank account number, routing number, and either the website, a phone call, or your own bank branch doing it for you. No bank account is not a barrier. It is what the Direct Express card is for. When you file, make sure the senior deduction gets claimed, and say the words out loud to whoever prepares it. If you already filed a year and missed it, 1040X is how you go back and get it, and it can be worth thousands across the years it covers. And apply for extra help. If your income is anywhere near $23,500 single or $31,700 as a couple, and your countable savings are anywhere near the limits, do not decide for yourself that you are over. Your home does not count. Your car does not count. Let Social Security run the numbers, because the SSA 1020 takes about 10 minutes and averages $5,700 a year to the people who file it. Ozella understood every word of the notice and had no way in the world to act on it. Rayburn did everything right for 38 years at his own table and found out in a barber shop. And Bernita talked herself out of thousands of dollars a year using the one asset the program never looks at. None of them lacked sense. Every one of them lacked a single page telling them what was actually true. So make this week the week. 1 phone call about the deposit, 1 sentence to whoever does your taxes, 1 10-minute form. Do them on an ordinary morning when nothing has gone wrong yet, because every one of these is enormously easier before it matters than after. I am Kevin. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to check the quiet rules at kevinexplains.shop.